Northwest Iowa's Floyd River has flooded about 60 times in recorded history.
But it wasn't until more than a dozen deaths in June of 1953 that the taming of the Floyd River truly got underway. KTV's Larry Wentz has more in tonight's edition of We the People.
It was one of the biggest thunderstorms in American history that caused it.
The 112-mile-long Floyd River, named for Sergeant Charles Floyd of the Lewis and Clark Expedition, begins near Sanborn in O'Brien County and empties into the Missouri River at Sioux City. That storm in northern Siouxland dumped up to 15 inches over a weekend, but Monday the 8th was a nice day in Sioux City.
There was just no sense locally that that such a calamity was going to happen.
But by 9:30 that Monday morning, a flood of water was slamming into the Leeds neighborhood after rampaging through communities along the way like Lamar's and Hinton.
Every single bridge that crossed the Floyd River between Sanborn and Sioux City was wiped out.
Most of the 14 deaths, which included 3 children, took place in the Springdale neighborhood, across from the old Sioux Tools plant and near the rail yards.
People had to break through the roofs of their houses and escape by boat from the roofs of their houses in Springdale.
The floodwaters also hit what's now the historic 4th Street area and devastated the stockyards as it sought refuge in the Missouri River.
So the Floyd for several months flowed in 2 channels through the stockyards.
Following that deadly 1953 flooding, a local congressman began to push Washington, D.C. for a plan and the funding to prevent a similar incident. Republican Congressman Charles Hooven had represented Northwest Iowa since 1943 and finally convinced the federal government to act. Now, 2 major projects were taking place in Sioux City at the same time: construction of flood control along the Floyd River and construction of Interstate 29 through Sioux City. The raising of dikes, digging some deeper channels, and rerouting some of the Floyd was finally completed in 1964.
It is designed to carry the 1953 flood. So that was considered the flood of record, but that's not necessarily the biggest flood possible.
While the Floyd hasn't been totally tamed, as we see in this recent flooding in Lamar's, the work that has been done, as well as improved communications, has lessened the likelihood of a deadly outcome like June of 1953. Larry Wentz, KTIV News 4.
And the cost of that project then was around $24 million. In today's money, that would be about $200 million.